320,000 children are missing from a multi-billion-dollar federal program. How is that possible?
What's this breaking news that you have? This is something big's going on?
Yes. So next week, typically we never advertise these things, but it is available now on the House Homeland Security Subcommittee. There is a hearing on Tuesday that I will be testifying on the crisis of the migrant children. So you, Tim, are the first to know.
Wow.
And your audience is going to be the first to know. So I encourage people, it's going to be 2 p.m. on Tuesday, and I encourage them to go watch the hearing and watch some people bring some heat down on this administration for trafficking children.
Yeah.
So do you think at the highest levels they know they're trafficking children into, I mean, let's talk about the trafficking. This is labor trafficking, sex trafficking. What are we talking about?
Yeah, both and worse.
Well,
worse.
Yeah. So you got to understand, your audience needs to understand, this is a $150 billion business. It's more than guns, more than drugs. Okay? $150 billion business. That's child trafficking. That's one child 10 times raped. And you can take a drug for one time and it's out the door. But a child can be used in many, many ways. And you got to understand that they're doing it with that one child is used in many different ways to make money off of that child. It's a child is a commodity, and it's huge. It's funding what the globalists are doing. It's funding everything that they do. And, you know, I can go on about, I worked in the Catholic Church. I became, there's a grand jury down in Florida. I actually became a witness and testified in a grand jury about these 3 NGOs, which is Catholic Charities, also the Jewish Foundation, and also the Lutheran Social Services that were called as they were getting billions of dollars through our government to go actually be on the border and actually traffic these children. That's a grand jury. That's, you know, these testimonies that Tara has done, Aaron, and some of these other whistleblowers, there's some, everybody can go look these up, that they're available to be watched by your audience, by people, you know?
So there was that massively viral moment. Dr. Phil, he went on The View, and he said, the head of the CBP union told me children will come across the border with numbers on their arms.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then CBP just calls the number, knowing that these children are being trafficked for sex or otherwise.
Yes.
And the CBP just says, sure, fine, whatever.
Yes.
And they know they're doing it.
Okay.
So I have to wonder,
Yeah.
who ordered them to do it?
Yeah.
Because I don't think some guy of his own volition is just sitting there being like, I've decided to let this happen. Someone told him it has to be done. The head of the union is saying it's happening. So do you think it goes all to the top that Biden himself, Harris, they're well aware that they're sending these kids to be trafficked?
Well, what we can say is that Biden was part of the Obama-Biden administration, and one of the biggest busts for labor trafficking occurred in Marion, Ohio, on an egg farm there. So they knew they had a trafficking problem all the way back then. They had Senate hearings, congressional hearings, all kinds of stuff. And what was very strange about the beginning of this administration is that on day one, they began rolling back all the border policies, which people know. But what they didn't realize is that it opened up the door for bad actors to cross our borders and then begin to use our programs as the delivery system for the children. So yes, does Mayorkas know? Absolutely. Does Secretary Becerra of HHS know? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And they know because every time they're called to testify before Congress, they will use interesting smoke and mirror words. Right? 320,000 children are missing from a multi-billion-dollar federal program. How is that possible? How is that possible? And so when he's asked about it, he's like, oh, no, there's no children missing. Mm-hmm. And you'll hear, senators pressing him and people pressing him. And he says, well, there's no children missing in our custody.
Right.
In your custody, what we're talking about is when you release custody to a random person in the United States who's MS-13, 18th Street Gang, transnational, crime member. No, what we want to know is where are the children now, to which they can give no answers because they know. Like Hannah Dreier of the New York Times, you may have seen, she wrote an article. Her first one was called Alone and Exploited. And you may or may not know, I'm not a great fan of the New York Times, but she reported the truth. She crossed this country. She showed debt bondage papers of children. Whoa. She documented children were working overnight shifts in slaughterhouses all across the country. Children not being able to go to school. This is horrific.
Yeah.
And yes, of course they know. They absolutely know.
Yeah.
We had one of our guests brought us these bracelets
Yeah.
that says something like delivered, or it's like a black bracelet they would put on the kids.
Yeah. Different colors. Jason Jones talks. So that's another guy you ought to talk to. He's amazing, man. Working down on the border. He's been down there for a long time exposing. He's a retired law enforcement. He's an amazing man. He has joined us on our summits, and there's different colors that they use for different kinds of owing. But wait, let me go back to something you got to understand, too. In 2021, there was a report that came out from the government that said in the foster care system, there were over 600,000 children missing in our country alone. So that's Trump. At the end of Trump, 2020 election happens. He doesn't win. Biden comes in. Now, mind you, DNA and vetting is going on, okay? Biden comes in, administration comes in, wins that election, or whatever you want to say, if it was a win. I mean, that's just still to be said, still to be said. But anyways, this happens with Biden administration. Now you see children coming to the border without any adults. So there were adults coming into before when Trump was in, bringing children to the border. Now you see just children coming to the border. Now you see 600,000 missing in foster care. Now you see a new supply of children. My point is, they needed a new supply of children to bring into this country because we pay the most to buy and sell a child. This country does. So that's that's a new supply of children. What we have found in our team is that there are huge satanic cults going on in this country. We were in Colorado Springs. One of our team members is a victim. She's an overcomer. She is a girl that, had 2 babies that were sacrificed in front of her. She's got a book called Silent No More, Lindsay. She's an amazing young woman. She actually broke the satanic area where she was when we were in Colorado. So we got to understand, like, my drive right now is going to be getting into these churches. I'm going to drive churches absolutely bizarre because I am done with this fake Christian, nonsense, leading their people in the wrong direction and lying to them and not being fake Christians. When I was working in the Catholic Church, this was exposed to me. That's why I testified against the Catholic Charities, because Catholic Charities is a nefarious organization, and it is a lie to the Catholics, and the hypocrisy's got to stop. We cannot fix this country unless we fix these churches and stop this hypocrisy that's going on. It's terrible. It's leading people to the wrong side, to the dark side.
I always thought it was kind of crazy because when, excuse me, when they talked about child separation, family separation, the argument from the right, from the Trump supporters was, or from the administration, we don't know that these people are related. Just because there's a child crossing a border and there's a man there does not mean that man is related to this person. And so, obviously we want to find out if this is a trafficking victim or maybe it's a child. And the media played it up like Trump was intentionally separating kids to punish people.
That's right.
And then you have, I think that's.
Well, there was no DNA. I mean, they stopped. He was doing DNA and vetting, but now when Biden comes in, there's no DNA and vetting. Mm-hmm. They stopped it all.
The other big thing, too, is when you get arrested, your kids don't go to jail with you.
Yeah.
That's like the weirdest thing ever, that they're like, no, send the kids to the same jail. It's like, well, I mean, the kids shouldn't go to jail. The kids are going to go to a holding facility, and the people who committed the crime will, go to it.
I'm going to tell you a story that one of our members was down on the border, and this is a very important story. And this is early on when the Biden administration came in, and things started changing radically down on the border. All hell broke loose down there. The doors were opened. Every criminal, everything was let them in. Okay. An investigator was down there, and he was standing around one of the areas in the border, and he fell into the ground. He sunk. His feet sunk. And when he looked down, he pulled his foot up, and what does he do? He discovers a little body. Ooh. He starts to kick the dirt around, bends down, and discovers it's a baby that had been gutted, literally.
Oh, my God.
So he looks down across the landscape, and he discovers bumps in the landscape. So this is a ground where the cartel and the criminals are taking babies from people because this is what they do. And we know the stories of, women that come across these borders and their children are taken and for money. I mean, they're threatened, their lives are threatened. It's a very disgusting, evil thing that's going on. And people need to understand this is the most evil time in our life. It's actually biblical right now. And we need to understand the depths of the evil. And children are the victim. They're the most way that believing, I'm a heavy believer. My faith is very strong. You have to have faith to get through the stuff that we see and go through in our lives. My family's been persecuted. We had to have faith. And you got to understand that this is a piercing of Christ's heart to get a child. The old saying, you put a millstone around your neck. I'd rather put a millstone around my neck and throw you in the ocean if you hurt a child. And that's really where we're at. We're at in a time period where it's got to end. They do everything they can do to use that baby. And by the way, abortion is another issue. I'm going to throw this out at you. Let me throw this at you. This is used in child trafficking. It's not just, feminists want, their bodies, women want their bodies, and I got free rights and all that. This is even worse. They got little girls down there, they're breeding. So they're breeding babies, and they're bringing them over and they're sending them into abortion clinics. So, James O'Keefe broke stories about Planned Parenthood a long time ago. Nobody listened to him. Nobody listened to what they were doing with those baby parts.
Well,
so
the left doesn't want to listen.
No, but people need to understand that there's a lot of people that have exposed things in the past that we need to understand is not conspiracy anymore. There is no more conspiracy. It's been happening.
Yeah. And I heard, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't remember exactly when it was. It was probably about a year ago, listening to Tom Homan. I was at an event he was at. And I think just most people don't realize the depth of depravity of people. And Tom got teary-eyed talking about an 18-month-old. And this 18-month-old who was no longer alive had been raped in every orifice. This is an 18-month-old.
Jeez.
And people don't realize the depth of what's happening. They don't know what's happening to the kids. Kids were telling us about the sexual assaults that they had been through coming to our border. And then once they're here in our care, there are NGOs. DOJ just indicted some folks at Southwest Key, which is one of the largest Latino-led NGOs, for raping children in their care as young as 5. Yeah. I think people just don't understand what's really happening. I think the average person doesn't have a category for who is going to rape a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old. Right. This is stuff that I wish I never knew. I wish I could bleach my brain. Yeah. But once I was hearing stories from the kids, you can't deny it.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.